If you recently ditched gluten for health reasons, you might be thinking you made a really smart move by choosing these gluten-free alternatives. But what if I told you that many of these so-called safe gluten-free alternatives are just as toxic, if not worse, than gluten itself? In this video, let's talk about this gluten-free trap and how we need to be so careful when navigating our way through these gluten-free alternatives. When I first learned about the risks of gluten, my natural inclination was to run towards these gluten-free alternatives. Things like your gluten-free bread, gluten-free pastas, gluten-free cookies, you name it. They were easy alternatives to switch into. And it's so likely that many of us that fall into the same trap when we first learn about the risks of gluten, and perhaps we may not have researched far enough to know about some of the other pitfalls that we can fall into, we often gravitate towards these gluten-free alternatives. However, many of these gluten-free alternatives that are labeled so-called healthy foods are probably just as toxic on our health. And the reason is because many of these products contain additives, synthetic ingredients, refined starches, preservatives that actually wreak havoc on our gut. And even though we may not immediately recognize it because its reaction isn't as aggressive as the gluten, it's still causing a lot of damage and compounding the damages over a period of time that often result in us not experiencing that true healing from our chronic conditions. And I know these foods can generally tend to be really hard to get over because many of them often resemble the gluten versions. And that makes it really hard to actually give up on these foods. Although one might think that these foods are helpful during a transition period, in fact, they can be quite worse because they often have these highly addictive ingredients like your sugars and your refined starches that make us become addicted to them and make it just as harmful as the gluten versions themselves. So something that we generally want to be mindful of whenever we're looking for alternatives during our transition period, and especially when we first learn about the risks of gluten. Right, let's break it down. Let's dive deeper into the ingredients that are commonly found in a number of these gluten-free products that are often keeping us from ever achieving a state of health and wellness, because these ingredients are the ones giving rise to all that toxicity in our body. And many of these ingredients are labeled as safe or safe for human consumption. However, they are causing a lot of havoc on our health. So one of the very common ingredients you'll often find in these gluten-free products is refined starches. Now, refined starches is not in its whole form. It's an extract of the grain itself. So oftentimes you'll see cornstarch, tapioca starch. This is not the whole flour itself. It's only an extract of it. And because it's only an extract, its reaction is very similar to white flour. It tends to spike up the sugar levels, give rise to more inflammation in the body, and it doesn't digest as well. The second ingredient that is also really bad is a number of these vegetable oils and seed oils that are added to these products. Now, this can be hydrogenated or not hydrogenated. Generally, these seed oils tend to be very highly inflammatory. This is something that I didn't recognize immediately, and I thought having a little bit of seed oils is still fine. However, these oils are so inflammatory, and you can immediately notice a reaction, especially on your skin health. If you're someone that struggles with acne, then this can be one of those ingredients that is just never getting you to a space of healing, because it continues to create more and more toxicity and inflammation in the body. The third one that is important to be mindful of is a number of these gums, such as xanthan gum or guar gum, that are added to a number of these gluten-free products. Now, they often labeled as safe, however, they are gut irritants. It's not part of our normal diet, and it tends to cause a lot of bloating and generally worsening of our digestion. The last one is artificial flavors and preservatives, additives that are added to a number of these gluten-free products. And many of us will recognize that preservatives are bad, artificial flavors are bad. However, these are deceptively labeled as natural flavors or potentially modified starches, so we don't end up immediately recognizing the threat that is within these foods. So something we need to be mindful of whenever we looking at these gluten-free products, that if they contain these labels such as natural flavors, there's often something deceptive behind it. Why is it that they don't want to include the actual name of the ingredient that they are adding? So these can hopefully help you make a much more informed decision whenever you choose a gluten-free alternative, and aim for those products that are actually beneficial for our health rather than these deceptively labeled products that are actually just wreaking havoc, absolute havoc on our health. Now I get it, it's pretty hard to transition to a 100% clean eating diet. I struggled with this, especially at first. It can be most challenging when you're first trying to get off gluten and trying to get onto a clean eating diet. Even now, I still struggle with falling victim to these gluten-free alternatives just because they're so convenient, and whenever they're around or readily available, it's easy to grab these convenience type foods. The problem with these foods is that they're highly addictive. They are engineered in such a way to keep us addicted to consuming these foods, and unfortunately many of us don't realize the amount of investment that goes into creating these foods, so that they keep us as a consumer perpetually purchasing these products and create this constant revenue stream for a lot of these companies that manufacture these products. And it's because of the ingredients that are added into a number of these products that make it so highly addictive. So if we want to make healthier choices, we need to learn to become more vigilant about these ingredients that are included in these products, and allow yourself to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up whenever you make a wrong decision and choose to consume some of these foods. As long as you can get back up, recognize the trap that you've fallen victim to, and put yourself back on track, back on that healing journey. Many of us, I've fallen down so many times falling victim to it, because these foods very easily grow their tentacles into you, and once they've got you, they keep you hooked onto them. But the easiest way is often just don't keep them around. As long as they're not readily available, it will be much more easier to switch them out for alternatives. Okay, so what do you do with all this information? I'm going to give you 3 quick tips. Number 1, be more vigilant. Try and read those food ingredient labels. Number 2, don't be so hard on yourself. I've fallen down many times, and sometimes we need these transition foods in order to get to a cleaner diet. And when in doubt, number 3, just stick to your whole unprocessed foods in the way in which nature provided. And that is the best types of food that you can have. Those clean, organic foods, especially if you're growing them in your own garden. What if you find yourself still addicted to all those gluten-free treats? The number 1 suggestion I have is to make your own gluten-free treats. That is the easiest way to control what you are consuming and to make sure that you're not adding any of these toxic ingredients. The problem with a lot of these packaged products is we are absolutely oblivious to all the toxicity that's added within these products, and we're consuming them mindlessly, unaware of the damage that they are causing to our health. So by making our own treats, at least you can be much more in control of what's ending up in your diet. Maybe times when we're traveling or away from home and the only options available are these gluten-free products. In those instances, I always try to select the one that's the cleanest product. However, I do recognize that those situations end up becoming the temporary exceptions to the norm. But the most important thing to remember is that in these instances, when we are selecting these products, we're mindful of the fact that yes, we are consuming ingredients that are toxic to our health, but the main thing to remember is that we don't want these temporary exceptions to become the permanent solutions in our life and integrate into our daily diet, because that's what often happened to me when I was consuming these gluten-free products on a temporary basis, is they ended up infiltrating into my daily life and my daily diet. And that's where I think we need to be very mindful of when we do make those exceptions, that we don't want to allow the addictive nature of these foods to just get into our routine diet. But I do recognize that if you have to travel, then there are always these times that we need to make exceptions because these gluten-free alternatives might be the better of the worst evils around. And sometimes we just can't tolerate gluten. I know for myself, the reaction with gluten tends to be so aggressive that you're better off just going with a gluten-free alternative when there is no other options available. Just remember that when a product says gluten-free, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy for you. Unfortunately, that's a trap that many of us find ourselves in. Stay informed, be mindful about what you're consuming, and be kind to yourself and take your time on this journey. And remember that your body will end up thanking you in the long run. If any of this resonated with you, please do drop your comments in the comment section below. Have you fallen for this gluten-free trap? As always, please do like, share, and subscribe. And with that, I'll see you in my next video.